In the first video of this next section, you'll begin working with frames. Now, frames are sort of like artboards you might find in Sketch, Adobe XD, or Adobe Illustrator, but they do have a little bit of a spin on them. Figma considers them to be sort of like special groups. Now, you don't have to use them that way, but they can be nested inside of each other and a lot more. So let's take a look at setting up some frames to start. So hopefully you're still on Figma.com and logged in, and you've got My Travel app open. What we're going to do is we're going to start to add our screens for our app. Now, if you're building a website or designing a website, rather, you're going to create pages. On the left over here, we're going to see the Layers panel, and you'll see that we actually have the status bar, and this means group. But if you look at it, you can see the content. We have a page here, which is what we're starting with. This is page 1, and that's all we have to begin with. And if we want to create frames, maybe, like I said, for an app, we're going to create screens. Come up here, and you're going to see the Frame tool. Now, if you click on the arrow there, you'll see a frame tool and a slice tool. Slice is for exporting. We'll learn about that later. But click on frame tool. And if you look over here on the right, you'll see that we have a series of default sizes we can start from. Even, this is actually kind of cool, social media, if you want to create like a Facebook cover, for instance. You could also draw or, resize later on. It doesn't matter. Come up to phone. I'll click on it right there. And come to iPhone 8. That's going to create what looks like an artboard to me, but a frame in Figma. Now, to zoom out, you can press the minus key, and you'll see you have a frame here. We can drag it around if we want. You can actually drag it from inside as well with no content on it. You'll see a scaling size down there. You can resize it if you want. Resize the dimensions here and do just about anything you want to. And you can also see a lot of the properties on the right. So if you want to change a background color, you can do that. You could say show this in the export or clip all the content. If we put content on this, it's actually going to clip to the edge. So if we draw a rectangle just to show you, you don't have to do this. And I go out and take the rectangle and put it out there on the actual frame. Make sure it's associated with the frame. Now it needs to be put in the frame here. Okay. I'm going to do this. I'm going to drag it into the frame itself. It should put it on the frame and associate it. And if you see, when I move it around, it's going to be clipped. So that's what I'm talking about by clipping content. So, and we've also got a lot of other things, including layout grids and different things like that. So what I want to do is this. First of all, I want to set it back to the iPhone 8 size. So come up to frame, and you can choose a different size or the same size. Change orientation. I want to change the name. So if you double click on the name up here, it's going to take you over in the layers panel there and say, let's change this. I'll just call this home and press enter or return. Now, we'll add a little grid to this. If you want, you can add a layout grid to this. By clicking on the plus on the right, you can do something like a typical grid, which is sort of like a pixel grid. And if you click on this icon here, you can go in and change what you want, columns or rows, or grid for that matter. Let's go to columns, and let's just do maybe a 2-column. That way we have a little bit of gap there for some stuff in the middle. Or you can go 1 column, it doesn't really matter. Actually, let's go 1 column right now. And we'll change the margins. The margins we'll put at 20 and press enter or return. You should see them out there. Now you can, if you want, change the color by clicking here, change the opacity, and you can stretch them, center them, or keep them to the left. That means if you choose stretch, if we have a layout grid and I drag to resize this, it's going to stretch the layout grid, which is really awesome. All right, let me go back over to iPhone 8. So we've got one frame out here. I want to create a series of frames. So if you take this frame right here, first of all, I'm going to press the space bar to move over. We can just copy this if we want to. You can actually option drag, and you're going to see we have smart guides or something similar to smart guides. Alt drag on Windows, let go of the mouse, then the key. You can also copy paste. There's a million ways to do this, but once you option on Mac or Alt on Windows, drag out a few. Oops, that one missed, so I'll go back. There we go. It should snap in. You should see alignments. And it keeps moving on me. Let me put it right where it should be. There we go. Now on the left, you're going to see that in the layers panel, we actually have them all listed here. If we want to, we can also duplicate and copy and do all kinds of things. If you click on these in the layers panel, let's change the names. So double click on the new home here. And we'll just call this something like login home. And we'll go to the third one here. Double click on the name there. And let's call this hikes. Now later on, we're going to create a copy of this one to do sort of like a modal or a layover, but this is what it means to work with frames. Next, we'll move on to creating and editing pages in Figma. Pages in Figma allow you to organize content in your files on different canvases. For instance, if you create a page to contain an iOS version of an app, you can also create a page to contain the Android version, or maybe create a page to hold all of the reusable elements you want to use, and a page for the app or the website. There really are a lot of uses for pages. In this video, you'll see how to create and navigate a page in Figma. With your travel app open in here, you should see on the left-hand side here that we have the layers of the content in the document, which includes things like the frames that we've created, as well as that content we pasted in. And we'll have pages up here. If you don't see pages, what you can do is click on the arrow to the left of page 1. Now, your pages, like I said, can be a lot. You can create a lot of them. In other words, you can create one for the Android and one for the iOS. We've kind of already talked about a few examples here. But if you want to create, let's say, another page that contains icons, and we've got this icon, this status bar icon up here, we're going to copy and paste into there. We can do that. So come to Pages here, click on the plus, and it'll add a new page, and we can name this like icons or something we want it to be. Then press enter or return. You're going to see it's not going to contain anything. It's just a big old canvas out here. And we can change the background color and do all kinds of things. Now, the thing about pages you're going to find is that we're not going to necessarily prototype or create connections between pages like this. So they're going to be different. They're going to be separate from each other, that is. But we can do things like export content from each. Now, to show page 1 again here, if you just click on it, you can come to the status bar here, and we're going to copy paste that. Now, if you click on one of the objects here, it's going to select that single object. We're going to talk more about this, but click on status bar, and what we're going to do is just cut and paste it. So if you know the commands, you can do that. You can also right-click right on the object here, and instead of copy paste from one page to the next, you can come to move to page and say, let's move it to icons. Click on icons, the page. That should open it up, and you should hopefully see it down there. Now, don't go grabbing it by an individual object, but grab it by the status bar right up here, and you should be able to move it around. So, like I said, it's treated sort of like a group of objects. This is actually, if you look at the icon, the same icon here, this is a frame. So you can see it's part of a frame. Now, just because it's on a frame, you got to be careful with frames to start with. We're going to talk about what are called constraints later on, but in this case, if we scale this frame, make it bigger or smaller, you're going to see it's going to actually stretch and squish, do all kinds of crazy things with these icons. I'm going to undo that by pressing Command-Z on Mac or Control-Z on Windows. Those are called constraints. If you click on an object on the frame, it's going to either scale or be stuck to an edge based on how you scale the frame. So if you look over here in constraints, this object is actually scaling. If you don't want that to happen when you change a frame size, you can come here and choose like left and top. Just stick it in there, or center it, or do something like that. That way, if I click back on the frame and resize it or scale it, you'll see what it does. All right, let me undo that, Command-Z or Control-Z. I wanted to point that out because if you start messing with the frames with content on them, you'll see different things happening. Okay, now I want to select all this content. So click on one object, shift-click between the other two objects. Let's group them together. So to group them together, you can right-click or control-click. You can also just press Command-G or Control-G. Let's copy them. So you can copy Command-C, Control-C. Go back over to page 1 by clicking page 1. And we're going to paste it in. And you're going to see it's going to associate it with nothing here. But I'm going to drag it right up here to the top of the home one. And let's put it right up there at the top. Now, I know it's white. We're going to create some content later on. We'll talk about that. But let's leave it there for right now. Go ahead and click to deselect.